As I was telling you, we will have 3 presentations. The second one by Elise Monge on the impact of our food system on climate change. And then Nicola Robecchi will follow up with how gastronomy should help to rethink recipes and tackle climate change. Let me present you Elise Monge. She's a project manager at Transitions, which is a sustainable development consultancy agency. Elise particularly works on corporate social responsibility and agriculture and food policies. After a master in political sciences, Elise got involved in climate and social justice citizen movements as a volunteer and a professional. Now Elise is committed to accompanying a large range of actors towards ecological transition. Thank you, Elise. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Giuseppe. Hi, everyone. It's great to see all these faces on the screen. So I'm gonna try to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So I hope you see, everyone can see what I'm presenting. So thank you for the invitation, and I'm very glad to be with you today to talk about our food system and its impact on climate change. So I'm going to start with a short presentation of Transition, the enterprise I'm working for. And then we'll go on with a short introduction on food system and the impact on climate change and vice versa. And then I'm going to have 2 approaches. The first one is going to be on food systems and climate change from farm to fork. And the second one will be on public food services, which is our subject this weekend, as a lever towards sustainable food systems. So Transition is a sustainable development consultancy agency, and we work at different level, local, national, international. We work with local authorities, companies, cooperatives, agricultural sectors, and NGOs. And we work to support the necessary changes and promote a more sustainable, inclusive, and supportive development. So as Giuseppe said it, I'm specialized on corporate social responsibility and ecological transition. So that's why I'm here today, and I try to do my best to be clear on my presentation. So let's start. And first of all, I wanted to have a focus, and this presentation will focus on this, a focus on food production. So according to the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, so the IPCC, and their report of 2019, agriculture, forestry, and other land use activities between 2007 and 2016 accounted for 23% of the total net anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gas emission. Even though those 23% are not only produced for food products, because it also includes production for energy, construction industry, land use and in that sector, agriculture accounts for 23% of greenhouse gas emissions. So in this sector, food production does have an impact on climate. As an example, in France, it is the second most impacting sector, so agriculture is the second most impacting sector, right after transports. In terms of carbon dioxide emissions, even though there has been a decrease of those emissions between 1990 and 2018. But what I want you to remember also is that food is a primary need. You can say, well, food is impacting, so I won't eat anymore. That's not just a solution. Please don't do that. So other solutions have to be found. And I also want us to keep in mind that still according to the last IPCC report on this question, 821 million people are still undernourished, 2 billion adults are overweight or obese, as Maurizio pointed it out, and 25 to 30% of total food produced is wasted. So this is not a problem of quantity. There is food. It is a problem of quality, a problem of equity, redistribution, access, and a problem of environmental impact. And Maurizio is right when he says that sustainability is not only about environment, it's also a question of social justice and equity in terms of access to food and to a healthy environment. So food systems and climate change from far to far. I'd like to start with a definition from the FAO of what are food systems. So food systems encompass the entire range of actors and their interlinked value-adding activities involved in the production, aggregation, processing, distribution, consumption, and disposal of food products. That originate from agriculture, forestry, or fisheries, and parts of the broader economic, societal, and natural environments in which they are embedded. So a food system is a chain of interactions between many actors of many sector activities. Though I like to distinguish different food systems, there is the globalized food system, and there are also very specific and local different food systems. Today, we are kind of stuck in a globalized food system based on global supply chain, which implies many exchanges all around the world, based on productivity, which implies to sell a lot in a minimum of time using fertilizers, intensive and very specialized production, and based on a very powerful and kind of rule-making agribusiness system. This globalized system, in terms of agriculture, forestry, and other land use, as I said, is accounting for 23% of CO2 emissions, 70% of freshwater use, and a very concerning decline of biodiversity in our countryside. Also, as we've seen, it's not a very optimized system. Mauricio talked about waste, and indeed, 1/3 of the food we produce is either lost or wasted, and it is generating about 8% of greenhouse gas emissions. With this slide, so don't read the small letters. Don't read everything. I just want to show you the impact of the production sector in the food value chain. Land use and farming, so what is in dark green, represent the most impacting part in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, way more than processing, transport altogether. And careful, I'm not saying that transport and the rest of the value chain is not impacting, but production is the most important part. Livestock production, especially beef, accounts for 2/3 of agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions. This is a reality, but I'm not saying neither that eating meat is necessarily a bad thing. I am saying that the actual mainstream system is not functioning, and we'll see that other solutions exist to sustainably produce animal-based products. Also, if our food system has an impact on climate change, I want us to know that climate change has an impact on our food system too. Agriculture and livestock production are at the same time responsible and victim of climate change. It's kind of a vicious circle. Land degradation reduces their capacity to store carbon, which exacerbates climate change, which exacerbates land degradation. And why so? Because local and pedoclimatic conditions are very sensitive to climate changes. Pedoclimatic conditions, meaning it's like a microclimate within soil that integrates the combined effects of its temperature, water content, and aeration. So it's like the very local environmental conditions of the soil. Also, water scarcity is threatening our food systems. And in a context of increasing demand and growing pressure on lands, food security is at very risk. However, as I said, food is a primary need, and there are many solutions to change our way of managing it. So our food systems can be an opportunity for climate change mitigation. We have to know that carbon sequestration in soils is about 25% of CO2 emissions. It's also an opportunity for landscape and habitat protection of biodiversity. And it's also an opportunity for food sovereignty, creating many local and territorial-based employments, generated resilient local systems, creating local systems for affordable access to food for everyone. And with those opportunities, within those opportunities, so what are the concrete solutions? Well, public food services actually are a lever towards sustainable food systems. Indeed, we need mitigation and adaptation solutions to achieve resilient food system. Mitigation implies sustainability through carbon storage, we talked about it, agroforestry, mixed farming, cropping and breeding, organic production, and so on. Adaptation implies resilience through relocation of production and consumption, a territorial-based approach of our food system. It implies fair trade and solidarity in our trade systems. It implies democracy and democratic decisions based on the very people who are living in the territories and actually eating the food they produce. So possible solutions could be a better value chain management, different dietary choices, and a territorial-based approach. Still, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, policies that operate across the food system, including those that reduce food loss and waste and influence dietary choices, enable more sustainable land use management, enhanced food security, and low emissions trajectories. In conclusion, we can say that public policies can positively shape food systems. And one of the most important levers in terms of food policy is public food services, which means food services in the public sector, so schools, health institutions, public institutions, and so on, But it also, I mean, when we talk about catering in general, we can also include the private sector, for example, food services in companies. In the global catering sector in France, I just wanted to give you some data to keep in mind. So the global catering sector in France represents 23% and the second most important segment of our out-of-home consumption sector. It represents 23 billion net sales and 3 billion meals a year. That's huge. And it is led by two major companies. Maurizio also talked about those kind of the big companies. And in France, it's led by Elia and Sodexo. Maurizio also detailed data about carbon impact, so I'm not talking about it again, but we've seen that it's kind of an impacting sector, and it could be a strong lever to go towards different models. Institutional catering, so or we can also call that a social or public food services, concerns particularly the public sector facilities, so schools, universities, hospitals, institutional facilities, etc. And they are a key public policy lever to structure sustainable food chains at a local level and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. For example, in France, in 2018, we had like an Egalim law, and this law requires that all the public catering institutions have more than 50% of their meals made of quality label products, among which more than 20% must be organic. Well, this is the law, but locally, many actors, many municipalities go, of course, and hopefully beyond that law. But I mean, at least there is a legal basis. And finally, public food policies and sustainable solutions from farm to fork can come from the relocation of food systems and more structured food chain locally. It can be based on territorial-based food system policies managed with local stakeholders, farmers, suppliers, citizens, public institutions, and based on the very local environmental conditions. It can be based also on the development of agroecology, respectful of biodiversity and all the natural resources around. It can be based on the access to affordable, organic and quality food for everyone. This is very important. And also, it can imply dietary diversification between plant-based food and sustainable animal source food. For example, mixed farming with cropping and breeding activities is a good way to produce animal-based products and also stimulate the local ecosystems. And as an example, in France, some municipalities and more of them chose to publicly run local farms to supply schools with local and organic vegetables. It's also an opportunity for the children to visit the place where what they are eating for lunch is produced. So there is also like an educational perspective in that public food policies. As a conclusion, we can keep in mind that if our food system has an impact on climate, climate has an impact on our food system too. And all the food systems are not similarly impacting. Then production is the most impacting segment of the whole food value chain, even though, as I said, processing, transport, distribution, etc., are not neutral at all, of course. Institutional catering is an impacting sector as a lever for very structuring food policies, and a way to promote dietary changes and territorial public management towards resilient local food system. So thank you for listening to me. And I'm very sorry because I know that I've been kind of fast and not deep enough on some notions, but I wanted you to have a kind of a large view of the subject to then have the entire weekend to go further on those points. Thank you very much.